In America, long before the guns of World War II crossed the ocean, a shadow had already fallen over its own people. His name was Jim Crow. Not a man, but a character, a mocking figure from the 19th century stage shows, painted in blackface, made to stumble and dance for white amusement. But Jim Crow became more than entertainment. He became law. For decades, Jim Crow meant segregation, oppression, a rigid racial hierarchy that told black Americans they were second-class citizens in their own country. Schools, buses, restaurants, even the right to vote was all separated by the colour of one's own skin. And when African soldiers of the 1511th Quartermaster Truck Regiment were sent to England in 1943, they carried that burden with them. They carried it into the quiet villages like Bamber Bridge and into a night that would become a nightmare. The pubs were closing, soldiers laughed, the locals were jovial, but then the night turned sinister. Outside one public house in particular, fighting would soon break out. Pushing, shoving, and then from nowhere, the sound of gunfire. This is the story of the Battle of Bamber Bridge, where centuries of prejudice, fear, and war would all combine. June the 24th, 1943. The village of Bamber Bridge lay quiet under a warm summer sky. Its cobbled streets and old stone houses seemed untouched by the war raging across Europe. But that night, war would come, not in the form of bombs or German soldiers, but from within the ranks of America's own army. Inside the Ye Old Hob Inn, laughter and song filled the air. Black American soldiers of the 1511th Quartermaster Truck Regiment drank with locals and British troops. For a short few hours, the men forgot about the war, the long days of work and the sting of segregation that followed them even to foreign soil. As the evening itself wore on, one of the barmaids in this public house had refused to serve one of the white American soldiers. And because of this, the evening itself was ending on an unsavoury note. Responding to a report of trouble brewing, two white American 234th military police officials soon arrived and entered the pub. They carried not just authority but prejudice and orders to arrest any soldier out of uniform or without a pass. Now, one soldier that stood out was that of Private Eugene Nunn. And from all accounts, he was dressed in what was known as a field jacket and not the Class A uniform that all these soldiers were requested to wear even when not on duty. The two MPs, they ordered Eugene Nunn outside and he would refuse. And as the voices were beginning to raise and the MPs were trying to forcibly remove Eugene Nunn, many of the locals from Bamber Bridge stepped in. And even one British soldier himself would ask the troops, these MPs, as to why they were acting in such a way. "Why do you want to arrest them? They're not bothering anybody," asked this British soldier. The moment teetered on a knife edge, but Staff Sergeant William Bird, a black soldier, stepped forward and calmed the scene. The MPs turned and left. Their jeeps were rumbling away into the night. But as they did, a beer glass shattered against their vehicle. A fleeting act of defiance maybe, but one that would ignite something far darker. These two MPs, they were fuming, absolutely livid at what had occurred. They sped off to fetch reinforcements. And it was when they were back at their base and describing what had just occurred, they were told to get back out and to do their duty and arrest those responsible. It was along Station Road that the black soldiers, they were then intercepted by these MPs and several other MPs. A huge row broke out. There was a lot of pushing, shoving. Things turned ugly quite quickly. And from all accounts, one of the MPs even fired off a pistol which injured one of the black soldiers. Now, the black soldiers themselves, they quickly made their way to what was called Adam Hall, and it was their camp. And their camp was along Mounsey Road, and we're going to visit that shortly. But it was there that the black soldiers, fearful of what the night was going to bring, they obviously told their comrades everything that had happened, that had occurred ever since leaving the Old Hob Inn. The village had by now somewhat descended into chaos, and word had spread like sickness that MPs were hunting black soldiers. Fear had turned to fury. At Adam Hall, the regiment's camp, men shouted, panicked, and armed themselves. At Adam Hall, the commanding officer himself, he was absent. So it was Lieutenant Edwin Jones who tried to quell this uprising. He tried to ask these soldiers under him to back down and to think about what they were about to do. He pleaded for trust. It seems, however, the voices of reason were drowned out by the grief and the rage that was swelling. As midnight arrived, and with it the growl of engines, jeeps full of MPs tore into the camp. The black soldiers were absolutely fearful for their lives. And in turn, they broke into the armoury. There were around 200 of these soldiers. But by breaking into the armoury, they armed themselves with as many weapons as they possibly could. This was going to be a night that would turn ugly extremely quickly. It was very close to where we are now, and close to Mounsey Street, where the second of the encounters with MPs took place. It was here where not just two, but several other MPs arrived, and where they encountered the GIs, the black GIs, making their way back to their barracks to Adam Hall. It's here where a big scuffle took place. Several people were badly injured. Scuffle broke out. From what we remember, I think there were at least one, if not two, soldiers that were shot, but albeit grazed. It's here where the soldiers, the black soldiers, quickly fled. Like I said, they made their way to Adam Hall and to the barracks, where obviously they would tell their comrades what had occurred. And obviously, the rest is therefore history.
Oh, here I am. Yeah, let's see. How do you open it? Do you know how to open it?
I think I can.
Oh, there it is. It's nice. Never get those things right. Well, goodbye, man.
Goodbye. It's been very nice meeting you
Glad to
both.
have met you, I'm sure.
Funny you should come from Birmingham, too, isn't it? Have you come to my Birmingham, you come to my home and have a cup of tea with me. Both of you.
Thank you, we will.
Goodbye and good luck.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Well, where you going?
Well, I think I'll get some cigarettes.
I'm short, too.
Well, I'll get some.
Good. Now, look, men, you heard that conversation. That's not unusual here. It's the sort of thing that happens quite a lot. Now, let's be frank about it. There are colored soldiers as well as white here, and there are less social restrictions in this country. Just what you heard, an Englishwoman asking a colored boy to tea. She was polite about it, and he was polite about it. Now, look, that might not happen at home, but the point is, we're not at home. And the point is, too, if we bring a lot of prejudices here, what are we going to do about them? Well,
To the people of Bamber Bridge, they welcomed these black African soldiers into the village with open arms. They mingled with them, they danced with them, they served them drinks in the local public houses. They were extremely friendly to one and each other. And it does appear that these black soldiers, when this fury erupted into the streets, they went out and they told these friends, these neighbours, to stay inside and do not come out. It does appear that the black soldiers themselves were anticipating something extremely bad to occur in the next few hours. But that would be an understatement, because it was far worse than just simply being bad. Gunfire ripped through the streets of Bamber Bridge. Muzzle flashes burst like lightning, casting fleeting shadows on stone walls. Bullets screamed across the cobbles. Men shouted, ducked, and returned fire. Villagers hid in silence, their homes shaking with the thunder of American guns turned on their own. Then a single bullet cracked through the night. One black American soldier by the name of Private William Crossland, he was shot in the back and he fell to the floor. We're going to get more into Crossland's death towards the end of this story, so stay with us for that, because it does prove quite important in how this fighting and this segregation and how Jim Crow was all interpreted back during the World War II era. The firefight raged until dawn. One officer, 3 black soldiers and 1 MP were shot, others beaten, bloodied, broken. By morning, the surviving men returned their rifles and the streets fell quiet again. But silence could not and will not erase this horror. After all, 1 man lay dead, dozens badly scarred, and an entire village had witnessed America at war with itself. Where the events of 1943 originated is just here, the Ye Old Hob Inn. And it's here where those black soldiers, those black GIs, used to frequent on a regular basis. But it is here where those 2 white MPs also made their way inside, and where Eugene Nunn himself was seen wearing, well, basically a jacket which wasn't supposed to have been worn that evening. Some say that these white MPs themselves simply picked on him because he stood out amongst all the other soldiers. However, obviously, racial motivation would point in a different direction and say that they spotted him, one, because of his colour, followed by the fact he wasn't wearing the right attire. It was an excuse, basically, to bring him outside, to make an example, and to arrest him. But it is here where, obviously, that evening erupted, and then further down Station Road, in that direction, is where, obviously, events took a lot darker turn, and Private William Crossland himself was, for best of a want of phrase, he was murdered. We're now going to leave the Ye Old Hob Inn behind us and make our way along Station Road and to where Private William Crossland was shot. We're going to visit the barracks, which I think is one of the few remaining features from 1943 still prominent. Obviously, you've got the pub, which is still here, but when it comes to the soldiers themselves, the camp or the barracks, it is still there. So one of the few remaining features. But we're going to make our way to Mounsey Road and where that barracks is. And on the way, we will visit where Private Crossland was shot and where he died. We'll visit some other locations if we can find them, and where obviously this rioting and this fighting took place. It was somewhere close to the corner of Cooperative Street and just off Station Road where Private William Crossland was shot in the back. And it was here where he indeed collapsed. It was also here where obviously this rioting, this war, if you will, it's here where it would escalate beyond, like I said, beyond anybody's imagination. I don't think anybody expected anybody to be killed during those moments, but things did turn ugly. And like I said, it was here where poor Private Crossland himself would fall to the ground. What makes this story all the more incredible is that some army officials were told to go and visit some of the local residents on this street, on Station Road, because there was evidence which pointed to the fact that some of the stray bullets that were fired during the fighting had actually penetrated and gone inside people's houses just along Station Road. So the soldiers were asked to visit the residents to see if they were fine, if they were okay, if there was anything that they could do to help. To be honest, it was more different. It was totally different than simply seeing if people were fine. They were going in as a reconnaissance job to see if they could find evidence of these stray bullets going into the buildings, and if so, they took them away. They tried to remove any evidence of this event ever taking place, which does feed into that narrative of why there is very little in the public domain, in the historical context, in the newspaper archives. Like I said, we found one article which says a lot. So for the soldiers to come to Station Road, to people's houses, to see if there were any stray bullet or bullet holes, and then they took away any evidence that they found. It's incredible that this story was trying to be hushed up. Mounsey Road, and it is down here where Adam Hall still is to this day. Okay, it's in a different name, but the barrack or the camp itself is very much still here. But it's down here where those black GIs quickly ran to explain, to tell their comrades exactly what had happened. So this is the former Adam Hall barrack or camp in which these black GIs, they were stationed back in 1943, and it's along here and back to this building where those unfortunate men made their way. And we can only imagine what took place and what conversations went on behind those doors before, during and after, obviously, this outbreak of violence. We know that these soldiers, they were treated as second-class citizens by the white soldiers, not by the locals of Bamber Bridge, but by their own comrades. There were two separate trials that followed these events. The first took place in August, when 4 of the black soldiers involved in this initial brawl, they were handed prison terms with hard labour, one receiving 2.5 years, the others 3 years, along with dishonourable charges. One of those convictions, however, was later overturned on review. The second and far larger trial brought 35 men before the court. When it concluded on the 18th of September, 7 were acquitted, while the remaining 28 were convicted. Sentences varied wildly, from as little as 3 months to as much as 15 years, with 7 of the men facing terms of 12 years or more. Now, when a review took place, all of the sentences themselves, they would later be reduced. One man was released outright, 15 were back on duty by June 1944, and 6 others had their punishments cut down further. Even the defendants who had received the harshest penalty ended up serving just 13 months before being returned to duty. If the events of 1943 weren't tragic enough, what makes this all the more disturbing was the fact that not one white MP was ever charged for their conduct during this melee, this riot, this gunfight that took place here in Bamber Bridge. Not even the white MP who had shot and ended the life of Private William Crossland. He was never brought to justice. Now, General Eaker himself would later to go on and admit the truth, saying it was the fault of white officers of the MPs who wielded prejudice like a weapon. To cover the scandal, trucking units were merged, racist officers were quietly removed, and MP patrols were forced into integration. A bandage lay over a festering wound. Now, I think to try to get into the mindset and try to understand why these events spiraled out of control back in 1943, we need to look at some of the historical evidence. And one thing that jumps out is that we have found and we have read that the three main pubs that were here in Bamber Bridge back in 1943, they stood in defiance as to what the white officials were demanding, not asking, but demanding of the hoteliers, of the landlords. And they simply said that blacks must never integrate with white people. That's basically what they were saying. The people of Bamber Bridge welcomed these black GIs with open arms. So by being told what they could and couldn't do, how they could and couldn't integrate with these black soldiers, the people of Bamber Bridge practically stuck two fingers up to those rules. And instead, they placed outside their public houses posters or nameplates simply displaying black troops only. Now, as you can imagine, this seriously wound up the white officials. For many of the black GIs, the welcome they received in Britain's shops, pubs and church halls was in stark contrast to the treatment they were used to back home. In the United States, especially in the southern states, strict segregation was the law of the land. Now, whilst researching this story, I have scoured endless amounts of newspapers from 1943 onwards. But it does seem like this story was either censored or hushed up. We found one single article in one of the local newspapers. Nothing else. No other newspapers that we have come across from 1943 talk about this event. It does appear that the military police, the MPs, along with their superiors, had somehow managed to keep this away from news reporters. Why is the question? Is it because they were embarrassed about what had happened? Did they know full well that here in Great Britain, when it came to integrating with blacks or blacks integrating with whites, vice versa, we had no problem with this? We had learnt from past mistakes, from historical mistakes, that segregation never ends well. So perhaps the Americans themselves knew that by allowing this story to break out and to become public, it would have brought huge embarrassment upon themselves. But it does seem that this story itself was most certainly covered up, or tried to be covered up. There is next to nothing in the public records when it comes to newspaper articles, when it comes to anything relating to this story, other than the one we have come across ourselves. One of the most difficult aspects of today's story in terms of research has been not finding a single photograph of any of those involved. As far as we're aware, there simply are none in the public domain. That's not to say none were ever taken. They are just not easily found, as we have proven. There's just nothing that we've come across. We thought there may have been a photograph of Private William Crossland. There's no such photograph out there. There's no photograph of Eugene Nunn or any of the white military police. There's nothing that we can find to overlay to show you who these people were. And these people were very much real back in 1943. So the question is, why? Why can we not find anything? This again feeds into the narrative that this story by the military, by the American military, has been buried. It has been hidden. It has been completely erased from the world. But it's people like myself and Vicky and other content creators and authors who are trying to keep this story very much alive, to show the world that what happened in this little village here in the northwest of England really did occur. And sadly, one man died because of it. But no photographs, no newspaper reports that we can find that were written in 1943. Newspaper articles have come out in the years, but hardly any back in 1943. And again, the question is, why is that? Jim Crow not only stripped black Americans of political power and economic opportunity, but it also ensured they were only treated as second-class citizens, even decades after slavery had ended. and wherever the US Army went, it carried those same attitudes with it. While black and white soldiers were paid the same, the command structure remained overwhelmingly white. When the guns had finally fallen silent, Bamber Bridge had become much more than a village. It had become a warning. It had become a lot more. Perhaps there are lessons to be learned here, and how the villagers themselves stood up to the white supremacists, the white officials that demanded that we, us English folk, us British folk, follow in the same steps as them. It shouldn't matter if people are black or white. It doesn't matter what colour skin people are. We all bleed the same colour blood. And it makes this story even more incredible that it was the same army, it was America's own that were fighting against each other. It wasn't Germans versus Americans. It wasn't even English versus Americans. It was Americans fighting Americans. The same people that were supposed to help each other in a crisis, in a war, but yet they were treated so very differently. It does seem incredible that obviously this event did occur. So there is a warning, and like I said, Bamber Bridge became much more than a village. It became a warning for future generations. A warning that racism has no place in this world, and we should all integrate, we should all work together. Doesn't matter the colour of one's skin. As for the soldier who sadly lost his life in this needless event, Private William Crossland, he was buried at Madingley Military Cemetery in Cambridge, United Kingdom.